13th episode of the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast, a monthly podcast devoted to the groundwater industry produced by the National Groundwater Association. I'm your host, Mike Price, and today we're joined by Tucker Green of the Georgia Association of Groundwater Professionals. We discuss Georgia's 2023 landmark legislation protecting groundwater rights, the importance of grassroots advocacy efforts, and more. Welcome to the podcast, Tucker. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. Excited to have the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get to meet up at the show last month in December. It's Groundwater Week 2024, but congrats on the special recognition award you received. How'd that make you feel?
Well, I thank you very much. It was a great show as always. NGWA does a fantastic job, and was a pleasure to be in Las Vegas again and see so many friends across the country in the industry that make everything happen. So, of course, a little special this trip. I was surprised a few months before that to be notified we were going to be receiving a special recognition award, and of course, felt very humbled by that, but appreciative, of course, and was excited that we were able to kind of spotlight and showcase our statewide association here in Georgia. And I talked about several times with the folks at NGWA that while I appreciated receiving the award individually, what we did was collaborating with a lot of different folks, and we had tremendous support from our members here in Georgia. It was a team effort for sure, but we were very honored.
Well, yeah, it was great to see your advocacy efforts being recognized at the state level. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. But you look like you're dressed for success today, as they say. What's a typical day look like as the executive director of the Georgia Association?
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. I will admit coat and tie is not typically my daily uniform all year long, but our legislative session is underway here in Georgia. I'm actually coming to you from the Georgia State Capitol. I'm tucked away in a meeting room and able to do this interview this afternoon. But Georgia's legislative session convenes particularly for the months of January, February, and March. So first quarter of the year is instrumental on the advocacy side for our work. And so when that's going on, I'm here every day looking out for the industry's interest and making sure that we're being proactive to make sure we protect our vital resources, protect the integrity of our industry, and step in where we need to. There's a lot of interactions, of course, in my job between the legislature here in Georgia, the elected members and state officials, and as well as on the regulatory side. We work very closely with EPD, the Environmental Protection Division here in our state, which of course has a important job in regulating our industry. And so we work closely with them and other state agencies here. And so we do that all year long. Our advocacy work never ends, but particularly it's prominent, of course, while they're in session and everything's happening here in Atlanta. And so that's what takes up most of my time during this part of the year. And then, throughout the rest of the year, my role as executive director for our association is, of course, to promote and help establish events and opportunities for our members to learn and engage and network and do a lot of different things similar to the work that NGWA does, but on the state level here for our members in Georgia.
That's excellent. So for full transparency, we are talking January 30th with Tucker here. Tell us how you got involved in the groundwater industry, your 90-second, recap.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a family-owned small business, construction business, not in the groundwater industry, but so similar to what many of our water well contractors deal with. I understood coming from a construction background what the sacrifices for a family-run business and things of that nature. So that's kind of my background. I was the first in my family to go to college and found my way into the governmental affairs world, and been very passionately advocating for small businesses and trade associations, primarily in the construction realm for a number of years. And early in my career, I was introduced to the groundwater industry through a mentor of mine that represented the industry here in Georgia and had for many, many decades. And I began working with him, and that was when I was first introduced to the groundwater industry. Now, I will say from an advocacy standpoint, of course, I knew about wells and how vital they are. I come from a rural community as well, and many members of our community and family members had well water. So I was aware of that water doesn't just appear in your faucet, that it comes from somewhere. And so it's been great to learn so much about how much this industry is regulated, how it works. And I will say, of all the industries I represent, that I think it is undoubtedly the most regulated industry. And there are so many parts between regulatory bodies, legislative bodies. And so water is something that has to be advocated for constantly. And there's a big need here. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to do that here in Georgia on behalf of our members.
And you say you've got about 300 or so currently members?
Yeah, we have a strong membership here. We're roughly about 350 members statewide here across the state. That includes water well contractors and pump installers. And, we're very proud of that. We've had a strong foundation laid before us many years. We've always had a good organization, but we're working to raise the bar every year and do more to make sure that we're well represented here.
Well, that's great to hear a little bit about your background, and gives us context into what you do. And what you did in 2023 was monumental. Can you give us the recap of the legislation you got passed, you got signed into law, protecting groundwater rights in Georgia?
Yeah, be glad to. Certainly, that's what's garnered us a lot of national attention and regional attention from other associations and organizations in the groundwater industry. Very proud, of course, of that legislation. And I want to say first, that didn't just happen overnight. It was a lot of years of groundwork to get to that point, building relationships here in Atlanta under the Gold Dome, and making our case and advocating, building up that reputation that we have as an association and as an industry here, that we are good stewards of the resources we have here, and that, it is a vital resources and that people should have choices. That was kind of the crutch of our legislation, was that as long as we were doing it in a safe and clean way that didn't harm the environment in any way, that people should have the choice, to have a well if that's something they want on their private property. That was the whole crutch of what we wanted to guarantee in law here in Georgia. And what we found is that when we would have these conversations, there were so many people that were surprised there was a need for laws like that. They were surprised that people didn't have choices in some situations. They thought if you owned a piece of property, it would be a no-brainer. You would be allowed to put in a well, install a well, if that's what you wanted to do.
Are you referring to legislatures?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that point of clarification. Yes, it was a lot of the legislators we would talk to. They were surprised that this was an issue. And so we had to do a lot of educating, took over time. And, one of the things we do well here, because we focus so much on advocacy at the association, we have annual trips to the Capitol where we bring members up. And so, I'm here advocating every day, but I think you can't put a value on having an actual contractor, a business owner, community member here at the Capitol talking to a legislator about the issues they're seeing. And what we were seeing is this wasn't isolated incidences. It was beginning to grow, that municipalities, counties, different local jurisdictions were strengthening or increasing their regulations on the local level. They were putting in minimum acreage requirements to have a well if public water was available. Might have been 5 acres, 10 acres, 20 acres in some instances. And we just felt that was not right, that, they were really in an inadvertent way mandating people to hook on to public water systems and not giving property owners the right to have a well. And we talked about a lot here with legislators and educating them that there's many reasons people want a well water. They may want it for a backup water source. They might want it to irrigate their flowers, irrigate their yard, irrigate their gardens. Some people just want that water over public treated water, or whatever the case might be. There's so many different reasons people want groundwater. And again, we felt like they should have that right. If that was, they're going to have to make that investment monetarily. they're going to have to make those decisions on their own. We're not going to give out wells for free. We're not trying to force people to have wells, but we thought that private property owners should have a choice. Mm-hmm. And that was our case. And what we found, fortunately, was that the people here, bipartisan, the people here in the Georgia legislature agreed with us. They thought it was common sense. And so we had some high-level meetings. We met with the lieutenant governor of our state, Burt Jones, who was very much a supporter of our efforts. We met with the Speaker of House, John Burns, at the time. He agreed as well. And from those meetings on, we really had some strong support to move our legislation quickly. And that's what we did. So we introduced the bill in early 2023 in the Georgia Senate, and it received unanimous support from that chamber. Went over to the House, and it received unanimous support there as well, unheard of. And we were able to quickly get that legislation passed and to Governor Brian Kemp's desk, in which he did sign it into law effective July 1, 2023. So that has been the law of the land here in Georgia for about a year and a half. And basically, and you may be about to ask this, if you want me to quit talking, I will. But basically, what our legislation states is that if you have 1 acre of land or more as a residential private property owner, you have the right to install a well if you choose. If you meet minimum setbacks, that's already in state law here. If you meet minimum setbacks, you have at least 1 acre. A local jurisdiction cannot deny you from drilling a well.
Thank you for giving us the clarifying legislation there. Verbiage, good deal. You said, like, that's so cool to hear. That's the success story. You said that other associations have come to you asking for input based on your guys' success. What have you told those associations or other people in our industry who are facing maybe similar issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Timely question too, because, and I don't believe they would mind me sharing this. I met with leadership of the South Carolina Association last week, literally just last week, and they've hired a lobbyist in South Carolina to represent them and their association in the industry there, and they're going to try and do similar legislation there because they're seeing the same issues that we were seeing here in Georgia. We've had others reach out as well, but that South Carolina, our neighbor, have been the most active group, and we had a lengthy conversation, and we were an open book about what we did here, the issues we saw, couple hurdles we ran into, and how we addressed those. We talked about some of the natural folks that may have concerns about it. A lot of times that's going to be the local governments, cities and counties. We saw that and experienced that some here, and I'm sure South Carolina seemed to think that's probably what issues they would have in their state as well. And so we kind of talked and engaged back and forth about what we did strategically to address that concerns, and how we stayed very proactive, kept our foot on the gas, and while as we gained momentum, I think I stressed that to them, that was the most important thing to us. They'll say, and strike while the iron's hot, and that's kind of what we did here. We had built the case, and we realized we had strong support from key players here in Georgia. And so while we wanted to put our foot on the gas and get that legislation done as quickly as we could before something else came up that took the oxygen out of the room or distracted, or, we didn't want to lose any momentum. And that was crucial, I think, for us getting our legislation passed and signed into law. And, like I said, we took the case to them, and to us and to so many, fortunately, it was just common sense. And that's how we, very clearly, in layman's terms, we made the case one by one to these legislators, and it paid off.
Unbelievable, unprecedented on both sides of the aisle. That's so cool.
Yeah. That was, of course, we were proud of our legislation, period. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the things that made me so proud, was that we had that strong bipartisan support, because this isn't a partisan issue. This is about water. It's about a natural resource. This is about, again, giving people a choice.
Exactly. Let's so advocacy efforts in passing a law, in advocacy in general. Can you elaborate on what that entails in your mind, and go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So my job, is very much to protect the industry in many different ways. To use a sports analogy, often from an advocacy standpoint, you're playing defense often more than you're playing offense. We don't go pass bills every year, certainly not as consequential as that one. That's a once every 10, 20 year feat often. And so often what we're doing is monitoring legislation, every bill that's introduced that may have any impact on our members, their businesses, and our industry, whether it be increased regulation, whether it be barriers for them to be productive business owners in their communities, whatever it might be. Uh, that's our job to watch very closely. Of course, in Georgia, we're a licensed state. Our members are licensed. They have to be licensed water well contractors or licensed pump installers. That's another big part of what we do. We want to protect the integrity of our licensure law, and we want to make sure that there's no bad actors out there that are not licensed and following the law and bonded and doing those type things that are doing work out there. So, and that again, work on the defensive side goes not just here at the legislature, it goes with EPA, EPD rules that are being introduced, proposed. We will be vocal with them when we have concerns. We'll speak at public meetings. We'll propose amendments and things from a regulatory rule side as well. So it goes across state agencies and the General Assembly when they're in session. Here in Georgia, every state's different. Ours is a part-time legislature, so they're not in all year long, fortunately. So we don't have to, they're only limited in what they can do per year. We know kind of it's isolated as to when they're going to be here and possibly passing bills into law and things like that. But I'd say that's a big part, playing a lot of defense, monitoring, reading the bills, reading rule proposals, staying on top of things, and making sure when we feel like someone needs to speak up for our industry and how it's going to impact us, we're at the table and doing so.
Excellent. And part of the advocacy efforts is, I imagine getting your members involved as well, but strength in numbers, that concept. How have you gone about eliciting member support in your government affairs initiatives?
Yeah, great question. It's crucial, and I preach to my members all the time how important it is that they establish relationships with their elected officials, not with every member of the General Assembly, but the people back home that they elect, the people they vote for, their representative in the House, their senator as well, that they know who they are and that they know who they are, but that they have a relationship, that they get to know their elected representatives. That is crucial. This is very much a relational business. It's a relational uh, world down here. And, while I may have great relationships and work hard to make sure I'm representing our interest, there's nothing like one of these members here under the Gold Dome getting a call back from home from someone who's in their district, one of our members. And so we stress that would be the case anywhere. I'd stress any state, any group, that any member, any business owner, that you need to know who your elected officials are, and they need to know who you are. And it's not to bug them every day, but it's to have that relationship. So when you do need to call on them, when something's going to impact your business in a huge way, that you have the relationship where you can do that. And I view my job as to facilitate that in some degree, and we work hard to do that as well. And it's just a few times a year, but we always try and bring our members up to, even when we don't have an ask, just as a reminder, so they know we're here. We know they know we're active. They know that we're keeping an eye on things, and that so when we do have that day where we need their help with something, they remember and have those connections back home. So I think that's very important. And so, again, part of that too is I think the more relevance in our members' minds from the association standpoint, we try and keep them updated with what legislation's introduced, what's happening under the Gold Dome, what's happening at EPD. And as much as we can, we invite them. We invite legislators to come to our conferences. We invite we invite EPD to come give updates. Whereas I think some people think, oh, we don't want to deal with them. We don't like dealing with EPD. We don't want them looking over their shoulder. Our position's been the opposite. We want to embrace them. We want them to know who we are. We want to know who they are. We want to be in the same room together. We want to have those relationships. And so that's been our approach, and we've had a lot of success because of that.
Excellent. And the breakdown of regulatory versus legislative sides of your advocacy work, can you differentiate the two for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've touched on some of that already, but
Yeah.
it is you can't forget one for the other. You have to keep your eye on the ball all the time, because it can be kind of a two-sided approach. Of course, the legislature has great power and authority when they're in session to pass legislation into law that hopefully the governor would then sign. He has the option to sign or veto. And that becomes the law of the land. So it has, long-term implications. That's a big part of what we do, big piece of the puzzle. But EPD has a lot of authority on their own as a department to regulate, to handle permitting, to handle inspections, to handle compliance for licensure and things of that nature. They have a lot of power and authority standing on their own. And of course, they're involved 365 days a year. They don't have an off session.
Yeah.
And so they're a key partner as well. And they have a lot of authority, and they're vital to our industry. So we try and have relationships with both. We monitor both. We try and involve both. And so I'm sure could vary state to state, but most states would be in the same situation. You're going to have a legislature that can pass bills into law, but you're going to have a state environmental protection division that also is going to regulate you, is going to be inspecting well rigs, is going to be inspecting wells, permitting, and things of that nature, licensure, on and on and on. And so you better be keeping a close eye on building and establishing relationships there too.
Yeah, it's a lot to do, but it's worth the effort. What are the top issues you got on your plate this year that you're monitoring in your home state and in the surrounding states? You shared about South Carolina already.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say from a macro level, I'm sure as y'all well know, at NGWA, PFAS has been brought up a lot, and I think that's going to continue to increase. We haven't heard much about it on a state level necessarily, but we're very interested in that and what kind of implications that may have on our industry moving forward. So we're keeping a close eye and ear out on that. Of course, interested in what this new administration in Washington will do from a federal level. We would anticipate that regulations would be reduced, but what kind of implications on our members might be coming from the federal level is of interest, of course, and time will tell on that. Here in Georgia, we have kind of a unique issue in that some folks may be familiar with the Tri-State Water Wars, which has finally been settled. It went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which Georgia was victorious in. And so we had a moratorium in Southwest Georgia for over a decade that's really had a lot of implications to our members and to farmers and other folks in that region of the state. So what we're going through now is a gradual lifting of that moratorium because of the successful lawsuit at the U.S. Supreme Court. And so our EPD has been very strategic, very deliberate in their approach, which we understand and respect. And so we've tried to be very actively engaged with them and encouraging that moratorium to be lifted. But we also understand the need to kind of have a slow and strategic approach. And so that's continuing. And so we're very excited about that. We're gonna actually start seeing some of the first permits issued in many, many years this spring. So we're excited about that. So that's been big for us. There's also some legislation just introduced this week here in Georgia that's going to bring some compliance reform for permitted versus non-permitted wells, particularly again in that Southwest Georgia moratorium areas where kind of the main focus is, where there may have been some wells that were non-permitted prior to the moratorium dating back decades ago that haven't been in necessarily technically in compliance. And so there's going to be some legislative efforts to bring people into compliance, and then to also begin doing some metering and detecting to make sure we don't end up with another Tri-State Water Board lawsuit or moratorium in the future. I think they want to be proactive, and let's make sure and document that we know where our wells are, we know what kind of water we're using, and that we are being good stewards and we're keeping a close eye on those aquifers. So I think that's going to be a big part of what we're looking at this year. And you never know what's going to happen around here. So we're always keeping our eyes and ears open too.
Yes, sir. And day at the Capitol, as we're winding down our conversation, when's the day at the Capitol for you guys?
Next week. We're excited. Our members will be here next week, Monday and Tuesday. We're doing 2 half days. They'll be here Monday afternoon, February 3rd, and then the morning of Tuesday, February 4th. We got some meetings planned with EPD and Department of Public Health, many legislators here under the Gold Dome. And so we're excited to have our members here in just a few days.
Excellent. Well, due to your legislative work, you won't be able to attend NGWA's and WQA's fly-in in March, but do want to speak up for that as well. That's March 25th and 26th. Reg for that is March 4th. That's the deadline. Reg deadline is March 4th, and you can register at ngwa.org/fly-in. So, boy, Tucker, a lot there that you've been doing. Great to hear all that you guys are doing, and really appreciate your time today. And awesome work with that legislation getting passed in 2023.
Well, thank you, Mike, very much. We appreciate all y'all's support and work at the federal level, and commend the work you all do, and appreciate you for involving us and spotlighting what we were able to get accomplished here in Georgia. Hate that I will not be able to attend the fly-in, but encourage others to do so. Advocacy is crucial on the local, state, and federal levels, and so encourage as many out there as can to participate at all levels, including the fly-in in March.
Well said, Tucker. Thanks again. Thanks for watching and listening to the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast. We'll be back next month with a brand new episode, so be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the major platforms, so it will be easy to find us. And visit waterworldjournal.com for the latest expert columns, feature articles, videos, and news covering the groundwater industry. So one more time for Tucker and I, thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.